I'm sorry, I didn't record. Let me start it over. All right, so thank you all for joining us today. We have our wonderful panel guests for our first wellness event hosted by FytAdmynLyfe. And today's topic is addressing stress reduction and finding a wonderful work-life balance in the midst of school leadership administration. So we will begin our session today by introducing our wonderful panelists, starting off with Coach Ambrose.
Good afternoon. I'm Coach Ambrose here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm a mental performance coach and a mindfulness teacher as well, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Allen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Michael Allen, 16-year vet educator, 14 as a principal of some kind right now, coach, mentor to folks all across various fields, and just basically having work-life balance and prioritizing equity and culture and inclusion. Very excited to be here with you all.
And Ms. Natoya Franklin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Coach Toya. You can just call me Coach Toya. I'm a former educator for 12 years and a holistic health coach. I specialize in helping women be fit mentally, spiritually, and physically, as well as doing a lot of work in schools, helping children to do the same. And I am delighted to be here as well.
Thank you all. I am Sharmika McCoy, founder of FytAdmynLyfe. This is my sixth year of principalship and 15 years in education. And I am so thankful to have these wonderful individuals here with us today. And as we get ready to begin, we will go ahead and go into everyone's experience in education. So if you could just share what has been your experience being an administrator in education or a part of education? Starting off with Coach Franklin.
Sure. So I started my career as a teacher, and I started teaching third grade. I don't know, that was some time ago, but I spent 6 years in third grade as a third grade teacher. And then I spent 3 years as a seventh grade ELA teacher. And then I became the district's first instructional coach. So that's my background in education.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Allen?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I guess I stole the spotlight earlier with that. I've been in education for 16 years, most of which were public ed, 2 years sort of as a full-time teacher, and then have worked between private and public schools. But the last chunk of time has been 14 years as a principal of some sort. So AP in middle school, principal mostly in middle school, and then the last 4 years as an elementary principal. So definitely urban, suburban, places everywhere from Chicago to Harvey to Waukegan, and more recently Evanston.
Awesome. Coach Ambrose.
Yeah, so I guess my route is a little bit non-traditional. I guess an informal educator. I actually came from the business sector into the nonprofit space, mostly community facing. I was coaching football right out of college, and that's how I started working with young people. And I volunteered for many years while I ran my business until I became a youth director at a youth center here in Milwaukee. And I actually volunteered to work at a high school teaching breathwork and meditation. And now I direct that program. So I have a program that is adopted by schools. And here in Milwaukee, it's actually a lot more popular in the after school or out of school time programs. So we work with teachers, students, and parents.
Awesome. Thank you. For myself, I have taught high school, middle school, both in the area of English and language arts. And then I've spent the last 6 years as a principal in Zion for 5 years at 2 elementary school buildings. And then in this most recent year, I am out in Evanston as an elementary school principal. And so thinking about the work that we do, so often we recognize, especially in this time and season, that it is really a lot happening when it comes to educator burnout. And we know that that burnout is very real as we're looking at the statistics coming out with the number of people who are leaving education as a whole, not just leaving the classroom or leaving schools, but people who are completely leaving the field of education. Um, as a school administrator, one of the things that has really recently come to light for me personally, but also for a lot of my colleagues, is what that's looking like for the school administrators who are really trying to keep the space moving and keeping the center on the kids, but the weight that comes alongside that. So today we're going to zone in and talk about what that experience has been like. So for this first section, we're really going to focus on work-life balance. So we will start with Coach Toya and just talking about what has been your Achilles heel with respect to work-life balance in your career.
I can speak from a teacher standpoint, and also I guess you can consider a almost administrator because in my district an instructional coach wasn't seen as an administrator. However, we worked with a lot of administrators, and in some cases our job responsibilities was much more like an administrator. um, and so as far as work-life balance for me, it was really important that I set aside time to really like focus on my family, um, my dreams, my aspirations, other than what my work entailed me to do. Because as an instructional coach, you almost become like a counselor, you feel like, for the teachers, because they're coming with you with all of their, not just uh, their complaints about being a teacher, but just personal things that are happening to them. And life just happens, right? And so, as a coach, as an instructional coach, you find yourself getting a lot of um, the heavy load of the teachers. And so I had to find a way to like release some of that stuff that was placed on me, either through exercise. Um, I'm very fit. So I have my own fitness business, and I focus a lot on fitness as a way to release, because I believe that movement helps you to release things that are on the inside of you that you normally cannot release if you're just, journaling or doing other means of releasing. So, finding ways to move my body, exercise, finding time for my family outside of the job, and just saying, you know what, I'm cutting things off at 5 p.m. That's it. On Friday, it stays at work. I cannot do anything on the weekend. And for administrators who are like APs and principals, I could see that being a challenge for you because your workload is so much more intense than an instructional coach. But those were just some of the things that I struggled with, just trying to figure that out and making sure that I do have that cutoff time.
As you found ways, like what was that thing for you that helped you to make that decision to like just be able to cut off? Because that's a very hard thing to be able to do.
I think my family spoke up. My husband was like, you got to stop. You can't keep doing this. You are wearing yourself thin and you don't have any time for us. What about us? And I think that was my wake up call, realizing that my family needs me also. Actually, my family needed me more. And having young ones too. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, but at the time I only had my 3-year-old wasn't even born, but the 6-year-old, they really needed me. And so if it wasn't for my husband speaking up about not having that work-life balance, I don't know if I would have figured out like, okay, how do I cut this off? Or even just prioritizing the fact that I needed to cut it off in the first place.
Awesome. Dr. Allen?
Yes, I would say my Achilles heel is it depends on the season of my career, right? But I would say the most consistent two that have come up for me over the course of my career have been not knowing when to say no. So starting off so young in education, I just threw my whole life into it, and not having been married and having kids, and I basically lived in the school, and I think that tied into my second Achilles heel, if you will, is it was not sleeping. So I would run on 4 or 5 hours of sleep when I really need about 7 or 8 to be at my full self. And I think those were the two that I noticed that have just, when my work quality is impacted or stress level is out of balance. The most frequent two that have been played for me over the course of my career have been not knowing when to say no, which I think goes to Coach Franklin's point, and setting those priorities. But then two, taking care of my body, like giving myself an opportunity to reset and be the best version of myself in the endeavors that I take part in and day out.
How were you able to make that shift?
You know, I think what I started, there was sort of this recognition at some point to where I started to understand, you know, I started to see people start to have health issues for these very problems. So folks having nervous breakdowns, or folks having aneurysms at work, folks being diagnosed with different types of health conditions. And the closer they got to me, I think I started to recognize that I had to reallocate or reevaluate how I saw my time. And as I started to understand how to be efficient and proficient at my job, I started asking myself, like, why am I doing all these different things that other people are capable of doing? And what else do I really value about spending my time? And as I started to do that, I sort of audited where I spend my time, not just at work, but over the course of the week, and started to see the disproportionality between pretty much my life was work. And I didn't like that. So I think as I started to prioritize how I wanted to spend my time, it was much more natural to move in a different direction. And one of the easiest things to do is just like sleep. So simple stuff for me that work, just shutting down my cell phone around 9:30, 10, and not touching it again until after I meditate the next morning. It allowed me to have uninterrupted time to really dive fully into my sleep and be present in that space.
Thank you. Coach Ambrose.
Yeah, those were good riffs there. Mine was interesting, right? Because I came from running a business for 8 years prior to having my real first job. So for me, it was really weird to go from working to get things done to working at a youth center from 1 o'clock to 9 o'clock. That was just the schedule. So that was, you know, just I went to work at 1, I finished at 9, and my natural self is networking, personal development, travel for work, things like that. So for me, it actually was a reprieve of some sense for 2 years being at the youth center. But then, like I said earlier, I picked up two more hours a day at least of volunteering. So I actually used to go volunteer at a high school prior to going to work at 1 o'clock because, you know, I love the FytAdmynLyfe. I think I was fit for that at that time, being a little bit younger. So I think for me, it's not so much work-life balance. I've been focused on work-life integration since I became aware of that. I feel like for me, balance is not the right focus. I think you have to be in balance to have integration. I think that's important. I've been working on this illustration for a while now, where think about like your car, where you have balance, you have alignment, right? You have that alignment and you need balance. They're very similar, but they're a little bit different, right? So for me, the balance part for me is the purpose of my life. I believe is so intertwined with my work that I feel really funny trying to separate those two things. So Sharmika, after we're done talking, I'm going to go to a board meeting. You know, if I'm going to do it at a restaurant with someone that I like to hang out with, it doesn't feel like work for me. It feels like I get to do something. So for me, it's about integration. So I'm actually trying to bring my work and my life closer together. At the same time, like MA said, 7 o'clock is dinner time, 10 o'clock is bedtime. I get up at 6:30. So I think it's my scheduling is helping me to balance. And also the benefit of being a personal trainer for so long, I didn't come into the space, you know, deconditioned, but man, those 2 years worked at the youth center. I mean, I was at a desk for maybe 2 hours a day. It really wrecked my body. So it gave me a better appreciation for physical health. And the last thing I'll say is with the pandemic, being at home, working remotely, I've been able to even rev that up even more, integrating my schedule into my work schedule. So I feel like I'm a lot more productive these days, a lot more efficient, a lot more effective.
That's powerful. That's the way I never would have thought to look at it, because somebody says, integrate your home and work. I'm like, no, I'm good. No, thank you. Cut it off, shut it down, separate. But that's a smooth way of looking at it and finding different ways and strategies. So you all shared some of these pieces, but before we transition into the next question, what would be some core strategies or approaches that you would suggest to people as they're trying to find this balance or integration? We'll loop it backwards this time. We'll start with Coach Ambrose.
I mean, I want to say it the best way possible, but maybe you shouldn't be a teacher. Maybe you shouldn't be in education. I feel like that's something that it's a longer story, but me and MA actually were going to the same GRE test on the same day. And my hard-headed self, I missed that test. I didn't actually make it to the test. And now MA is, who he is today, Dr. Allen. So I've always had a craving of some sort of being a teacher, being an educator. So I think my mindset, getting a chance to work with young people is different. And from my experience, I find that most educators really do start off with this similar passion or purpose or craving to be of service. And hey, maybe at some point you realize it's not what you thought it was. And again, I'm not sure how education actually works professionally because I'm an informal teacher. But sometimes my question for them is just like, yo, you can leave. You don't have to do this. But I understand what that means in business is called sunk costs, right? So I put so much time into this thing, I'm just gonna ride it till it falls off. And I think when you have a ability to retire, that's probably what, 20 years, 25 years as an educator, right? So people just focus on that 20, 25 years, but it's like, yo, you're only 2 or 3 years in, you can stop. So again, me being an entrepreneur, I've changed my way of doing things about every 7 or 8 years. And looking at that now backwards, like, oh, I've been doing that. That's not my mindset. That's what I naturally do. So I would say, like you don't have to be stuck where you are. And nothing's wrong with realizing, hey, the way I'm thinking about supporting education or young people, maybe it looks different. Maybe you become a coach, right? I trained so many teachers early on, teachers and nurses. That was my whole clientele, right? Maybe you write curriculum. Maybe you go to the state level for policy. I don't know what that looks like, but I know that the work that I'm doing in schools, the people who are burned out, they create so much more stress and pressure, not only on themselves, but their colleagues and the students, that I do wonder sometimes, like, hey, can we put you somewhere else on this bus because you might be in the wrong position? And I say that, respectfully, but, we're seeing this right now with great resignation. People are feeling this permission to leave, right? And this is nothing new. This was here prior to the COVID, just exposed what was already happening, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. I believe the trauma of COVID and things that we've been encountering brought a lot of things to the surface where people can't ignore it anymore, right? Life seems a lot more precious when we're seeing a lot of things that are happening. And Dr. Allen?
Yes, so I would say the strategies that I found to be really effective, I would say number one, just making time, even if it's just 3 to 5 minutes to check in with your body daily. I've been pretty good at it, but I think early on in my career, I think I ignored it. So, I could probably tell a story to drive that point home, but I remember the first time really knowing what it felt like to not carry tension and stress, really being over the last 6 months. But two, also understanding the value of enhancing your circle. This could be colleagues at work or other administrators who hold you accountable for being able to have similar approaches to life. But it could also be a personal circle as well outside of work. But what I'm noticing for me is that when you got friends, lifelong friends like Ambrose, and even colleagues like Sharmika, and I could throw out some other names, Marlene, Aponte Matthews, folks like that, they're gonna hold you accountable for quality of life. Like, so there's never gonna be, when you bump into them, you're gonna see a mirror of what it is that you actually want to do and be at your best self. And so there's accountability that comes with that. And then the final piece would be, I'm recently learning this, put everything that you value about yourself on your calendar. Like it took me a while to give myself permission to put exercise on my calendar. Like this sounds crazy, but I put work on my calendar, but I don't think about naturally the importance of all those other things I value. Sometimes, like for stressful weeks or long busy weeks, I put drink water on my calendar, but put all the different things that you prioritize on your calendar. I think those are strategies that I found to be really, really helpful and valuable.
Thank you. Um, that's accurate. Oh, I had to do that for lunch, right? Lunchtime. Because if you don't think about it, before you know it, it's 4 o'clock and you're trying to figure out why you hangry at everybody. Coach Franklin.
I just feel like I could really, I really feel what Ambrose said. Like, I got to a place where I said, you know what, like, I know that I'm called to lead children, to help coach children, the development of children overall. But does that look like I have to be in the classroom? And I think that just to think about your why and your purpose and getting into alignment with your purpose. And I found that I didn't have to be in the classroom to find that balance for me or that integration, however we see it and view it. For me, it was if I could still teach, if I could still reach children, if I could still help the whole child develop, I'm good. Um, and I found a way to do that as an entrepreneur and as a holistic health coach pushing into schools through my program. And then the other piece of it is because even as an entrepreneur, you still got to find that work life balance, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you got to hustle. You don't work, you don't eat. And so it's different. And so for me, I have to realize, like, okay, so I have children. I've got the work of being an entrepreneur, and I have my family, and I have my husband. I have all of these roles that I'm playing, but I have to take care of me first. Because if I don't take care of me first, I can't do the rest well. So for me, it's finding out what makes me smile, what makes me happy, what makes me feel energized. And some of those things that make me feel good about myself and energized are exercise. I love fitness. I love dancing, right? I love being with my best friend, going out and just, going out to dinner, going out to lunch, and just talking to my friends. I love bowling. I love skating and finding ways to, like, I think it was Michael said, like, finding ways to put that on my calendar and schedule it in on a weekly basis. I think that was it for me. And so every week, exercise is on my calendar. Every week, hanging out with a friend is on my calendar. And those things are important to me. It gives me life. It gives me life, and it energizes me. And then once I'm able to do that, then I feel like I can continue the work of pouring out to others.
Awesome. Thank you. So when you think about a time where you were the most out of balance, where it was just the scale was way out of whack, what were some things that you noticed about your physical, mental, spiritual, social, emotional health that helped you to put that into perspective? We'll start with Dr. Allen on this one.
Yeah, this is this is tough. I would probably say this is the reason why I brought that strategy up earlier about just checking in with your body daily. You really got to know what your baseline is day in and day out to have an idea about what this will look like. But for me, when I'm out of balance, I would say number one of my gifts is my patience. And oftentimes when I find myself having to force myself to listen in conversations, I can see that something's not right because listening I love. And so when I'm having to force myself to do it, I can usually ask myself, like, what happened today? Am I stressed? Is there something else that's on my mind to where I have to keep holding myself accountable to pay attention and listening? Other things would be focus. Specifically, again, I really can access thoughts readily, but when it's hard for me to focus at the rate that I find to be acceptable for me, again, I know something's not right with me. And then I would probably say the final thing is usually like fatigue. So if I'm finding myself, it's like 9 a.m., I just arrived to work an hour ago, and it's hard for me to focus on the first meeting of the day, I'm not right. I'm not balanced. Something's off. It could just be that everything's okay, except I'm stressing about something that I need to figure out how to let go. I may need to just hop into the conference room and do a 3 to 5 minute breathing exercise, and then I'm good. But those are probably the things that I've noticed about my body is based on how I check in with myself daily. Some of those foundational things that I think make me unique as a leader are inhibited when I'm out of balance.
Thank you. This way.
So first thing is I'm snippy. Like everything gets on my nerves. Like everything. Like I could watch something on TV and be like, well, why did the character say that? Like everything bothers me. So I think the level of irritation goes to a whole nother level when I am out of balance. And then I think I'm a very spiritual person, and God likes to speak to me in my sleep and in my dreams. And when my dreams are disturbing, something's going on. So I pay attention to that because a lot of times I'll get like new revelation or just a new step or something, some guidance in my dreams. But then when my dreams become tormenting, or I could barely sleep, or I'm tossing and turning, I'm restless, something's off. Okay. The other thing is body aches. Yes, I am very active, but when I have I could literally feel knots in like my neck and my upper back in this area, and no amount of sleep can help relieve that pain. I know something's going on. My body is asking me to rest, like not just sleep, but you know what I mean? Like rest from your thoughts, just finding that way of getting back to alignment with my, just inner peace. So my body speaks to me very vividly, and I can't ignore it. Like tomorrow, I'm going to go get a massage because something is just needed, right? But yeah, that's what I would say for me.
No, that's like I would have to echo everything in which both of you said. Mine is being snippy. Cuss words come to mind before appropriate answer. I have to filter a lot. The body speaks, the thought process, everything is muggy and cloudy, and it takes so much energy. For me, I'm very creative, so it takes a lot of energy for me to be creative. And so like when that burnout is rising up, it's the steam like in the bottom of a tea kettle. That's what's happening as opposed to just that natural outpour. So it becomes very clear when I am out of whack. And then I fall asleep on a dime, like on the couch or sitting still. But when I go to my bed, I'm tossing and turning. So it becomes the opposite. Whereas usually I can't sleep on the couch, right? But when I get to my bed, before I hit that pillow good, I'm out. So it's like our body really does have a lot to say to us about how we are moving and things we need to recenter. Ambrose?
Yeah, so I was thinking about times in my life, but I'll condense it down to what actually happens. I feel like for me, it's first thing I notice is I don't want to be social. I don't want to be around people. I need some time to myself. I need that daily anyways. And I get that, again, working from home now, my partner leaves for the day. So I get a lot of time with myself, but not want to be around friends and family is a big indicator that I'm probably out of balance. And also my appetite changes. Either I don't want to eat at all, or I want to eat a lot. And typically eating a lot is a sign that I'm stressed out, right? But the other way is like depression, or not clinically depressed, but just like tired. I can go without eating and I realize like, well, I haven't ate, for a day or day and a half, what's going on. But yeah, that's probably the two things that come to mind most when I'm out of balance is isolation, and then food on one end of the scale, either too much or too little food, or water, even hydration.
That's sweet. Not sweet, but that's so tired. So if you had to say one thing, and each of you really did speak to this in a sense, but if there had to be one takeaway from this particular section where you think about your area of expertise that you would want to leave people with, what would that be? And we'll start with Ambrose.
Yeah, I'll just express some gratitude for you, Sharmika, for MA and Toya. This is Saturday. You're busy people. You probably aren't getting paid to do this. You could do something separate, right? So thank you for doing what you do and doing the extra stuff. And I'm not sure, but my inclination is that you see this as something that you get to do. You don't have to do. So that goes back to my little rant earlier about responsibility. For folks who are able to, who are fit for the responsibility, we need you to do what you're able to do. Like, please do that. And for those who aren't fit for it, we're not judging you or shaming you. We're giving you some grace and space, but maybe you're holding a place that you shouldn't be holding. So with that said, just want to say thank you, Sharmika, and for people who are like you, who are creating space. I'm not sure Toya's experience, but for me, trying to push into schools has felt like that, like pushing into schools. Even right now, when people are stressed out, so the program is called Sky Schools. We literally can't give it away here in Milwaukee. And I go to other places across the country and they invite me in. And I'm like, what is going on? So I get to remember to have compassion, empathy, and grace for people who are in these positions. So I'm just feeling really inspired by talking to you all today. But yeah, gratitude, I would say, is the thing that I would express as a practice. Gratitude for yourself, for other people, and then some awareness, right? Awareness of your own capabilities. And maybe the signs that you're getting is a sign that you get to do something different, learn more, ask for help, as Mike said, right? Get your circle of influence higher, but maybe listen to this podcast again, because there's so much information. I'm going to go back myself because I heard a lot of bars from everybody here today. So thank you, Sharmika.
Thank you. Toya.
I was just going to say, and Ambrose spoke to this, just being mindful of where you are. I think one of the things we've discussed in other conversations is that there's no way you can have transformation without self-awareness. And so my biggest piece is being aware of where you are. All of us spoke about the signs our body tells us, but if we're too busy, we can't listen. If we don't sit in it long enough, we can't hear. Mm-hmm. So if we're ignoring the signs, that is going to be detrimental to us. And I had no idea, like I could not even imagine, Michael, seeing coworkers have brain aneurysms on the job. Like that's not been my experience. So I don't know how traumatizing that would be for me, but you don't want it to get to that point. Mm-hmm. Do something now before it's too late. So that's my takeaway for this section.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, it's interesting. I believe in the universe kind of like providing a consistent message. So I'll drive home the same 2 points, but put my own spin on them. Two I can't confine it down to one. I would say, number one, love and accountability for yourself, recognizing that that'll have a trickle over effect to others. Mm-hmm. So giving yourself permission to really be accountable for what you know you need in order to continue to thrive, not just survive. And then the second piece, which Toya just pretty highlighted, is self-awareness. So I studied emotional intelligence in undergrad, and then went on to write a dissertation about it at my doctoral level. But I do think this is what we're all saying in our own way. Like you have to actually pay attention to your body, because it has an impact, number one, on the quality that you show up with each and every day, but then two, the impact on your personal life. All those other people around you at home are impacted by you. So you need to be aware of what's going on with you in that respect. Those would probably be the two biggest takeaways for me in terms of work-life balance.
Thank you. For those who are watching, if you have any questions that you would like to pose to our panelists around work-life balance, please put that in the chat or send it as a message, and we'll definitely come back to it. For this next section, we're going to talk about those life transitions. So you all actually each in your own way spoke to this piece, right? Education is hot right now. Life is hot. I'm just going to say life. Life is on fire for a lot of people right now. They're trying to figure out how in the world to keep going one day after the next. And a lot of times, I'll speak for myself in this vein. I love what I do, right? I love being an administrator in public education, because I often think if I leave public education, somebody has to stay to help support our babies who have no other options other than public education. And I know, like, if Sharmika dies today, I do know that there will be someone else who is called to keep that work going, right? I'm not the end all be all, but I just think about what each of our purpose places looks like. And in those moments when I have been the most burnt out, I have stopped to say, like, what in the world, what am I good at? Because maybe this is the last day that I do this work, right? Like, what am I good at that I can bring to this world so that I'm not dying to this work, but I'm able to do it from a place of life. Coach Ambrose spoke to that in a sense where he said, you know, sometimes you got to look at what else you can do, right? Where else are you called to do the work? Coach Franklin spoke to it like she recognized that there were other places that she would be able to do that work where she could still feel that it was life-giving versus depleting, as is Dr. Allen. So my question to you all would be, actually not my question, as we go into this next place, I'm gonna ask Dr. Allen to just share a story of a principal whose life got flipped and what that looked like. But before you do, we do have a question. So I wanna take that. The question is, how do you keep yourselves motivated when you're feeling overwhelmed? So whoever wants to speak to that one, feel free.
I'll jump in. I feel like, and this sort of ties into where I think we're going with this too, is I've always looked at education like a sport, and having played organized sports all of my life, I knew I wasn't going to play football forever. Like my body would not allow me to do it forever. So after football was over, I knew that I needed to do something else. And so that really gave me the ability to know, like, all right, if we have 5 a.m. exercise, it's not always going to be fun, but I love football. So that's why I'm getting up to do this. And I want to compete at the highest level. I have to exercise, I have to condition, I have to eat well, all those different things. But I do think, and this is what I think is important to note, because I think Coach Franklin was driving this point home. I understood probably around 30 that if something happened to me, they would have someone in my place, in my seat the next day. And so it made me understand how to balance stress and but also stay focused. Like at the end of the day, education, we're in the people development business, and that we have babies that are being entrusted to us, and we're trying to turn them into people who are well informed and educated and ready to do something magical in the world. So we don't have seconds to waste. So I believe in being, when you step through that door, you have to make sure you're good enough to be able to provide the best version of yourself for those students. They deserve that, and the parents demand that. But at the same time, don't lose sight of the fact that, hey, if you don't take care of yourself, something happens to you, they will replace you. Just like in a sport, you get injured, somebody else comes in the game, literally the next play. So it's important to note that.
That right there, the next play, like that's reality right now, right? If I go to work and I leave on a half day, somebody's going to keep it going the second half of the day. Like that is really par for the course. Anyone else have an answer to the question as far as how do you handle being overwhelmed? What keeps you motivated rather when you're overwhelmed?
I kind of like Coach Ambrose's idea about focusing on gratitude. But I think when you're overwhelmed, your brain is automatically thinking about the bad. Oh, I'm so overwhelmed. There's so much going on. Like, and you know what? I'm not underestimating that we're all doing life through this pandemic, and it's hard. Wait, hard is an understatement, right? Oh my goodness. We are going to be in those history books, and those kids are going to be like, how did they make it through this? But for me, it's trying to find ways to focus on the good, because if I just focus on what I cannot do and what I cannot change, then it's a wrap for me. Like I'm depressed. But if I can focus on anything that's good, that I got the ability to breathe and move my body, that I have food, that I have friends and family who fulfill me, that I love and appreciate. Those kind of things keep me motivated, you know. And if there's a way that you can journal like the good, or just gratitude on a weekly basis. It doesn't have to be 30-minute journal time, but just 2 minutes, something happens that's like, oh my goodness, that was great. Write it down, because you're going to go back to it. You can go back to it and reference it on those days where you're feeling like, man, I can't go on. I want to quit. So that would be my my answer to that. Just focusing on gratitude and focusing on the good, if you can.
Thank you.
I love that question. Always, my perspective typically comes as a personal trainer, but probably being an athlete. And I tell my clients all the time, motivation is BS. You're not probably looking for motivation. So I do a lot of etymology, and I'm a history guy, but the idea for motivation, I ask people, you know what the word motivate actually means? The average person has no idea what it actually means, right? So to motivate means to pull out something from somebody else. So find someone's motive. To Coach Toya's point, what's your why? Your why is your motivation. And if you're finding you're struggling with your motivation, it probably means your why is either you're unaware of your why, right? The why doesn't really change that much, or you have attached some other things to your why that probably are too short-lived. So I think what most people are actually looking for is inspiration, right? Somebody outside of myself getting me moving forward. And I would say, hey, you can do that, but that's probably going to be expensive to have Coach Toya text you every morning some words of advice, or to talk to Dr. Allen. You can do that, right? Or you can listen to YouTube, you can read a book, you can read the Bible, you could do so many different things. Like the whole saying of take a shower every day. You put on lotion every day. I love to put on lotion once a week and then be moisturized the rest of the week. It doesn't work like that, right? So I have to get motivated or inspired every single day. So I think for me, it's always going back literally to a whiteboard. Like, why am I feeling overwhelmed? I'm probably doing too much, first of all, right? What can I say no to? And secondly, to May's point, I'm probably just not strong enough or fit enough yet, right? So what skill can I pick up? What can I delegate? Who can I get on my team to help me carry this load? But going back to the why, I think is really important. And that why comes from you. The motive comes from you. No one can give you a motive. So I tell my clients all the time, it's BS. Look at the real word of motivation and understand, if you want to be motivated by somebody else, it's going to be a lot. Time, money, effort, attitude. And you probably don't have that much to invest. So your best deal is to go back to the starting blocks and build up that slowly, so that when you get that pressure, you think about it being a privilege, right? And not just pressure. It's a privilege to be pressured, right? But if you're fit for it, you'll be okay.
You hit on everything I was going to say, so I'm not going to say a word. Like, that was like mic drop, end of the message, right? Because that why is everything, I find. It, like, you have, in the hard moments, I always tell my staff, go back to the why. Write it down at the beginning of the year when you're incredibly excited about the school year. You got all these big hopes and dreams. Write down your why. Why did you start this work? What do you want to accomplish this year? So in those high burnout moments, you can go back and look at that to re-encourage yourself on what to do next, and then to delegate some of those pieces. Like, it's definitely often too much happening when you're in that space. So I love your answer. That was powerful. In the chat, someone put, and it goes back to Coach Toya's statement, do not overthink the negative, but take that time to live, breathe, and relax. So thank you to that, Reverend White. That was that's right on target as well. So for our next piece, we're going to go into Dr. Allen, and he is going to kick off the segment where we talk about what does it look like when principal had to make a life transition. So.
Thank you. Ambrose kind of talked about this earlier, just the idea of the Great Resignation. And I would say, I don't know that my experience is directly in that, or at least my story, but I found myself, I don't know how many people have followed my career or the different things I've been able to be fortunate and blessed to do in public ed, but there's really no day ever since I've started in public ed where I didn't love it. And what is interesting is, though, I found myself, and I've never really prepared myself to know when the time would come. But I think life sometimes just throws you that process. So for me, I found myself spending all of my time immersed in this world and really just threw my whole self into it. So much so that I think it was around the fall of 2020 where I kind of knew, I found out, my family and I got a call and basically found out that my mom's cancer had returned. She'd been battling it for 2 years. And we knew that where she was at this point in time, that she had about 3 to 4 months to live. So she was going to transition to hospice. And I was responsible for leading the school in the pandemic, the school that I loved, and staff that loved me, and students that loved me, community that loved me. But the presence that you need in order to be an effective leader today demands a certain standard. And also, my mother and my relationship demanded a certain standard. My commitment to myself demanded a certain standard. But anyway, that was a really tough phase for me, because I think while I'm going through a lot of adversity, there's no way to ever prepare yourself to like lose your parent. And so that particular experience for me got me to a point to where once my mom transitioned, and my community was completely supportive of me throughout that entire time. So I was superintendent, Dr. Horton called me and pretty much was like, whatever you need, we got it, let me know. And, you know, I was able to take off 2 to 3 days a week easily and spend time with my mom. And everything, even when she finally transitioned, I was able to take leave to be supportive of myself. But what I found is something happened with where I was going in that process. It wasn't bad, it was different though. Something happened with, I realized that I wasn't just a principal, I wasn't just a professional, I was a person, I was a human who had all these complex feelings and thoughts and emotions that I think were part of me, and I didn't have the platform to address. In short, not only did I prepare myself to take a leave after my mom passed in December, and then kind of get back on board around February and get our school successfully through that school year. But in the summer, it just as I was getting our school improvement team back rocking and rolling, what I realized after my mom passed is that my standard for how I planned on leading schools was impacted radically. And I didn't really know when it was going to repair itself or if it would. And by standard, I mean, the things that made me effective, like memory. So I could recall everyone's, not just names, but stories, family situations, dogs. I can remember where we ate food, like what food what they, all those different type of intricate details. But the grief that I was entrenched with when my mother passed, it impaired my ability to access certain parts of my memory in real time. So I had it all, but if I could access it in 3 seconds, it took me sometimes 3 minutes, which, you know, if I'm having a conversation with you and we're talking and I could do something in 3 seconds and it's taking me 3 minutes, the conversation's over. Now you're in your car driving home before I can actually access that memory. But different things like that were a part of my job. And I feel like it was impacted. So I would say for me, from my own self-reflection, after my mom passed, I found myself at a place to where what I felt like I needed to do as a principal, I'm not comparing myself to colleagues because I think my supervisors maybe didn't even understand or see a difference compared to other people. But for me, I was probably functioning at about 30%. Memory, abilities, different things that I felt like were part of who I was and how I led. So much so that, and I think I may have told a couple of you this story. I remember a conversation right before the summer hit, where I was talking to a couple of members of my team, and they were asking me a question about something, and I said, I can't remember. I don't know what it is, but I don't remember it. And they kind of were like, "What's going on with you, Dr. Allen? Like you need to get it, but you're a little bit off your square." And I said to them for the first time, like, I'm a human being. Like I buried my mom. Now I'm not sure if you're expecting a machine. And I know neither one, like they didn't mean any harm. But they had prepared themselves for every second that they came into that building and worked with the principal, who was Dr. Allen, for me to be the same. That wasn't necessarily unreasonable considering the standard that I set and lived by up until that point. But what I was forced to deal with after that particular situation was, well, what's the standard that I set? how do I feel about how other people are going to respond to that? Number one. And then two, am I going to choose to be a machine, or am I going to choose to be a human? And then what are the implications on the other people? And the whole time, not just that. And what about the babies? What about the young folks? So to make matters more complicated, about 2-3 weeks after that, I get the call in late July that my father passed away. It was abrupt. So we didn't have the preparation like we did with my mom. We knew 2 years, cancer eventually is going to be fatal in most cases, in a lot of cases. And we had 4 months to kind of reconcile, heal, and build new memories with her. With my dad, we got the call, and this was in proximity about 7 months after my mom passed. We got the call that he passed away abruptly. No one could identify him. He was a John Doe in Cook County morgue, and so we ended up having to do a memorial service. As you can imagine, whatever I did access with my mom after my mom passed away that allowed me to lead at the standard that I felt like was appropriate was radically reduced, so much so that like I was just bare bones holding on. And again, if you pass me at the grocery store, if you pass me on my way into the school, if you pass me in the hallways, I still was myself. You know, my personality wasn't impacted. It was just all those other different parts of me. My spirit was impacted. And that my daddy was gone, my mama was gone, and I'm here trying to figure out how to find my way in life. And I never, as any person can imagine, you never could prepare yourself for that experience. Anyway, what I think was important to note is that this field of education doesn't necessarily have, and this is why I like talking about the conversation with those 2 staff members, they weren't prepared to see me. They saw me as a human and a machine together. And they never recognized that the machine breaks down and human has to actually live no matter what. And I think that for me, the real work was about, okay, what needs to happen? And for me, I found myself, and I don't know that my story is as unique, is as general as a lot of people who make the decision to leave public ed. For me, it was just a matter of saying, I'm more than what I do. I'm actually a human. And in order to be able to do what it was that I was designed to do, which is only part of it is education, I have to make sure I reset and refocus and recharge my batteries. And that doesn't just mean like food, that means like spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And so I ended up taking about 3 months to just travel and experience food and culture. There were some experiences where I just gave myself permission as a Black man, straight Black man in America today, to just cry 2-3 days in bed. But that opportunity to leave public education, again, I don't think it's necessarily about public education as it is about just doing something that's structured, traditional, gave me permission to find another part of myself. So much of, as much as it was hard and difficult from a grief perspective of losing both parents, had something so radical not happen, I would have never been able to give myself permission to tap into the next level of myself. And more importantly, to think about balance. So one of the key things I remember my mom saying to me before she passed was like, you know, you're giving all this stuff to all those kids and, you know, baby, they got a special place in heaven for you. But do mommy a favor, go live your life. Whatever makes you happy, whatever you haven't thought about that makes you happy, go do that. Go do it now. You know, and I remember thinking like, what is he talking about? But had all these things not happened, I wouldn't have understood. You know, there's so many different ways to help children. There's so many different ways to empower people. And the first way that you start with that is you have to actually empower yourself. You have to really take advantage of making sure you heal and go through that. And so that would be my story of how I got from, you know, giving my life to education to find my next level of life, which is partnering with education and doing so many other different things. But each day, the thing that I think I learned from having such radical adversity in an impromptu way is that you just got to care for yourself, because if you don't, you know, your body will only do what you invest in it. And so you have to make sure you understand that. I don't know if were there any specific pieces that I'm leaving out that you wanted me to tackle, Sharmika?
Okay, yeah, nothing to that. No, I think that's just powerful to the truth of your story, right? And 2 things that you said that, well, a lot of what you said really stood out, but 2 things that I found to be very significant were, one, we have to be able to know who we are outside of what we do. The 2 should not just be synonymous. Like, I am not just a principal, right? I have to know that I am more than that. That's just a part of how I pour out my purpose, right? But it's not who I am. So being mindful of finding our identity and in our purpose as opposed to our career. The other thing you said that really struck me was um, giving yourself permission to be good in your humanity and separating that from the machine, because people do expect the machine, right? People expect us. You didn't respond to my email. I'm sorry, you sent it 3 minutes ago. Um, you're not answering my phone calls. I understand I was in a meeting with the other 10 people, so it's like, it's that constant want and desire and output that people expect, but they're not recognizing that as a human, there is only so much that you can do. There is only so much that you can pour out at one time. And in my most stressful moments is when I was trying to be the machine as opposed to giving myself permission to walk in my humanity. And we have to be able to slow down enough to do that. I was talking to Coach Ambrose before we started. He was like, "How was your week?" This week was phenomenal. I gave myself permission to slow down. I gave myself permission to cut off my email, to cut off my phone, to limit my meetings, to take time when I needed to for my children. Last week was hot mess, hell on flames, bus burning up. I think I went to the ER the day after we had our session to prepare for this panel, because as we were talking, I was thinking to myself, I'm gonna stay on the phone with them because right now my body doesn't feel right. Something happened, God forbid, there's 2 people on the phone with me. And then I laughed at the fact that it wasn't funny, but the irony was we were preparing for a wellness panel on work-life balance and stress reduction. And I'm thinking that thought, right? So I had to give myself permission to go provide self-care. Everything was fine, but in that moment, I was thinking, I can't take off work tomorrow. I got to do all this stuff. And then I was like, but if I die tonight, does it matter? So it's being mindful of our humanity, being mindful of our bodies and where we are and how we show up. And then recognizing that it's not all about how people see us as opposed to what we need to do as we're showing up for others, but most important for ourselves and those who we love. So it just struck some chords. So thank you for sharing that, because I know that took a lot of transparency as well. Do you all, Ambrose or Natoya, do you have any comments before we go into the next section?
I really just want to say thank you so much for your transparency, because for, like you said, a Black man to state what you just did to that level, and the level of emotional intelligence that you have is commendable. I mean, even just from saying that you took time for yourself, and cried in bed for 2 days. I commend you, like, for real. And Sharmika, I really wanted to speak to what you just said. And I really wanted to just kind of point out that you said that if I die tomorrow, will it really matter anyway? Or if I die tonight, will it really matter anyway? You have to get to a place where you realize, like, what's really important. What should be my priority? What should be my focus? And I think sometimes we confuse other people's priorities as ours. I think sometimes we need to be delivered from people pleasing. And even in this profession, depending on, I remember being the teacher, the third grade teacher, trying to keep up with the third grade teacher next door. And I couldn't keep up because she had it going on. She just had the Pinterest room and she had bulletin boards up and her artwork was amazing. And she had all the best strategies and all this. And I'm like trying to keep up and I couldn't. But I had to realize that I had to get delivered from people pleasing. It's not about, I got to put out my best self and what I'm able to do. And it's not my responsibility for how people receive that and whether or not they receive my best self. I'm just going to put out my best self, right? And that's it. And that's all. And so I was just thinking about what Dr. Allen just said and how he said I had to choose between the machine, people pleasing, right? Or me, the human. And you chose being human and prioritize your needs above others. And I just, again, commendable. So that's all I got to say.
All right, so into our next place, and we like have been speaking all over this entire time, but when we think about that stress reduction, right? What are those things when we're looking at reducing our stress that are essential for us to do to be able to just continue moving forward and being our best selves? So with that, what are some system level advice pieces that you all would be able to provide? And I'm actually going to throw this one over to Coach Ambrose. When you're like you have spoke about how you do this in your daily life and your work, what are some system level pieces that you can advise people to start doing that would help to reduce that stress as they're going through their daily lives and work piece?
Sorry, I was laughing. I just saw Kiana's, she sent me a direct message. I won't read it out loud, but if you want to put that message on the public on Kiana, they'll probably laugh. Systems level. Yeah, I think the first one is having the elite mindset. We've all spoke to this, right? As I said, even having this FytAdmynLyfe group, that's a unique mindset. As MA talked about going into his profession like it's a sport, elite mindset, entrepreneur, elite mindset. And the question that I always ask myself is, what do the best people do in my profession? I didn't think about that going to college, going to football, and going to school. I just had no awareness of like, what does the best college student do? But my boss when I was in high school said, treat college like this job, Ambrose. Start at 8 o'clock in the morning, end at 3 o'clock. That's probably the best advice that I got, because freshman year I crushed it. And May knows what happened sophomore year. I kind of lost that system, but I treated school like a job, right? I had 8 o'clock, 3 o'clock practice, and that was the system that I use. So I think just a mindset shift is, what do the best admins do, best educators do? And I think we talked about a lot of it, right? So for me, it's just having a couple of pillars that I always focus on, and it's non-negotiable, right? My sleep is non-negotiable. My exercise is non-negotiable. My nutrition, non-negotiable. Now, I've had those things because of being a trainer, right? But then we talked about emotional intelligence, awareness. The next one for me is mindfulness, whatever that might look like for you. So mine is a breath work practice, gratitude practice in the morning. And after that, I'm still getting into it, dipping my toe into it. It may help me out with this one, but mental health access, right? Professional access. I don't have a therapist yet, I'm playing around with it, but being able to have someone that I can speak to that is non-biased, doesn't know me in a professional, personal way. I'm inching towards that system, learning about that from MA and a few other people. And I'll say that the last one that I really rest on is healthy relationships, right? So even tonight, after I'm done with what I'm doing, I got 2 hours probably for a nap. Then my nephew's coming over with my little sister. Uncle's gonna come over with my other cousin. So having people around me. So the high level, finding these big pillars, as I call them, and then figuring out what that looks like for you. So those 6 for me are the ones that I really focus on. And but the first one's most important is, what do the best people do? I like to call it elite. MA always said he was LeBron James of education, right? I like that, right? Because it puts LeBron spends what, $1 million a year on his body alone. People wonder why he's playing this long. Well, he's telling you exactly what he's doing. You're just not following his advice because you have some belief system that blocks you from doing that. So for me, it's the belief system and those other 6 pillars.
Awesome. Thank you. Coach Natoya?
I think having a morning routine has been a game changer for me, being a mom and a wife. When my children, they're still young, so they wake up at 6 a.m. even when I don't want them to wake up at 6 a.m. It's Saturday. Can you please go back to sleep? But I have to wake up before they wake up in order for me to have my personal time. Because if I don't, it's not going to happen. right? And if I don't have that personal time, my stress management tools just, they're not there. So I have a morning routine. And I used to think that being the spiritual person that I am and being churched, I used to think that first thing you get up, the first time you get up, the first thing you do when you get up, you gotta pray for your feet hit the floor, right? And it's gotta be deep, right? You gotta be like an hour in prayer and all of that. And that didn't work for me because I wasn't even fully awake yet. So it didn't work. So for me, I would have to I have to get up before the kids get up, and I have to exercise first. I don't know, it's something about me, but the way I'm wired is when I exercise, it's this release, and endorphins are released, right? We know that scientifically. But then I feel like my brain is more able to pray and to have a deeper conversation with my creator. You know what I mean? So I exercise, then I pray, right? And then after that, I have some quiet time, whether it's me meditating on, just the word or just being quiet, completely quiet in silence. And that takes me. I do teach classes in the morning, so part of that is my fitness routine. But if I'm doing it independently on my own, all of 30 minutes, all of that, just 30 minutes. And if I can't do that, the rest of the day is much harder for me. Um, but yeah, I think if you can find a way to have a system in the morning, a morning routine, some way somehow, and maybe for some of us it's a bedtime routine, but for me, the morning routine was a game changer.
Thank you. Dr. Al?
Thank you. So I'll try. My disclaimer is I'll try not to sound too much like an administrator in schools, but I'm going to try to go into a system perspective because I'm doing it on purpose because I think people get too focused on the person and don't think about the person and systems. So that's the approach I'm taking. So the biggest, and there are 4 areas that I want to highlight. Most of them, Coach Franklin and Coach Ambrose talked about. The first one I would say is comprehensive mindfulness. It has to happen in schools and districts immediately. It should have happened 5-6 years ago. For me, we were going into year 4 at Oakton in comprehensive mindfulness, meaning that we were taking part in various school-wide breathing exercises together to sort of focus on the value of present moment awareness of our staff and students, thoughts, feelings, sensations, whatever was going on in their bodies, free from judgment. Again, the value with that is I think that I could make a strong case, especially at Oakton, that any success that we may have had at the school level that was related to my leadership, in part was related to the structure of how we prioritize comprehensive mindfulness. So that meant in year 1, we started off with just a baseline approach to guided meditation. Then we expanded to in year 2. By the time we hit year 3, kids in our 2-way immersion program are getting mindfulness in their native language. Folks are getting it in ways that fit their particular learning style. They have strategies that apply at home. Kids are actually leading the mindfulness. Adults who are in the building know what it means. It's actually in our staff meetings. It's in my weekly newsletters that are going out to parents. That's what comprehensive mindfulness means. It's like it's living, breathing. That starts though with like leadership actually implementing in their own life, which I think is what Coach Franklin and Coach Ambrose were talking about. So that's the first one I think is really, really important to think about what that can look like and prioritize step 1 with that. The second piece is access to therapeutic services. So Ambrose talked about this as well. I'll go and say this. I talked about my story, but what I didn't say is I've been in therapy for almost 9 years. Had I actually lost both my parents and hadn't been in therapy before I actually had a traumatic experience, I wouldn't be where I am today. And today I'm in the best version of myself that I've ever met. There's no doubt about that. But therapy, the time to go get therapy is now. Do not wait until you get divorced. Do not wait until you lose your job. Do not wait until you have some type of adverse experience. Do it now in your baseline experience because it becomes a priority of your baseline knowledge of yourself, and it balances you out. Much like you prioritize health, diet, and all these other different things, therapy fits into that same paradigm. I'm actually not just talking about the person though. I'm talking about school districts and systems. there needs to be opportunities for people to kind of get educated on how to even access therapy. I remember when I first started, even as a principal, I didn't know that I just needed to call the number on the back of my insurance card. My copays were $20. I could pick whoever I wanted. I didn't know it was really seamless in the sense that nothing stopped me from getting that. It does vary from person to person depending on what your package is. But therapy is that. The third one I would say is reevaluating how we look at, so from a systems approach, sick and personal time. So, Sharmika didn't say this, like if she had used up all her personal time and all she had left over was sick time, what would happen if she used sick time but wasn't technically sick? Like, people shouldn't have to worry about that. There should just be wellness days. I think there's some implications with employers, particularly school districts, to actually just change all of that stuff to wellness days so people don't have to feel bad about actually doing stuff that their body needs. And then the final piece is just focus on spending time with the people you love the most. So, whether it be if you're a superintendent or you're a principal or you're someone in schools, like for me, I love kindergartners in terms of the school. So when I had a bad day, you can find me in a kindergarten classroom in there with them reading books or just spending time off away, because they made me feel like a rock star. They rejuvenated and recharged my batteries. But outside of that, folks who work with me in schools, I love my people. And that means like the humanity of the people in the community. So much of what I feel like my leadership is undergirded in over the course of my career is just like spending time in the community in spaces that you wouldn't expect for me to be with my people, because I think that gave me life. And I think it made them understand the value of who I was as a human too. So those would probably be mine, Sharmika.
Awesome, thank you. So as we go into this last little mini section here, and you all really have spoken to this consistently, is thinking about that identity piece, right? We talked about we are more than just what we do. And when you know who you are, then it helps to negate us from falling into that people pleaser trap and that machine mentality. But it also gives you permission to be able to either realize that you need to change career trajectory, or I'm good in what I'm doing, but let me tap into those other components of myself so that I can do what I'm doing better and have more enjoyment with it. So as you all think about that, what would you say have been the parts of your identity that you value the most? What would you say have been the parts of your identity that you value the most? And we're going to start with Coach Ambrose.
You're asking a lot of good questions over here. This is a good one. So I actually do a process called the Who Are You process that is interesting because it's different every single time that I do it. Every time I do this Who Are You process. So the ones I like the most or identify the most is probably definitely being an athlete, from being a young boy. I wanted to play in the NFL, and I played football, now I coach, but athleticism is something that I think drives me. Even as I get older, I'm realizing now that shifted to, I don't have any children yet. So my focus now is if I'm 60 years old with an 18-year-old, 20-year-old, can I still do certain things, right? So now my focus has shifted from fast jumping, running, right, to being able to move well. So athleticism is definitely one. Being a cousin, and being a cousin really means like also a brother, right, a nephew, but family's definitely a big part of my identity. Whatever label that is, right? Son, brother, cousin. And lately, this idea of being entrepreneur, I haven't been saying that for very long. I didn't believe I was one. I thought I was just a business owner at first. But lately I'm doing more entrepreneurial things. And that's definitely giving me somewhat of a psychological advantage, I believe. So when the pandemic hit, I got to be honest, right? People are definitely going through it. I can't lie. It's been, for me, an opportunity to say, okay, cool. I've been preparing for something like this with this mindfulness practice for the last 8 years. Like, let me see what I can do. So like yourselves, I was able to make a pivot early on in the pandemic and just do more what I did before and do it in a way that hopefully impacts more people. So I would say those three things: family, athleticism, and then entrepreneur.
Thank you. Natoya?
Um, I feel like everything that I love doing and like the essence of my being, like I love, it kind of falls under the umbrella of being an exhorter, a person who lives her life to bring out the best in everybody. And I know that might sound like exhausting and draining, but it actually gives me life, if that makes sense. Um, there is a proverb that says, "He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed." And for me, I think as a teacher, that's why I loved teaching, because seeing that light bulb come on did something for me. And so everything that I do now, being a health coach, exhorting women to be their best self, it falls under exhortation, right? Being a mom, trying to bring out the best in my children, falls under the umbrella of exhortation. Being a wife, right? Being a helper to my husband and just bringing the best out of him. I always tell people, if you want to slack, don't be around me, because I'm going to push out the best. It's just how I was created and I can't help it. So I would say that. And so everything that I do, everything that I produce, everything, it just falls under that umbrella. I've recently started writing now. So all of my books are really about, like, one of my titles is "It Takes Grit to Be Fit." Okay, so now we're talking about mental and physical resilience and how to bring out the best even in the midst of chaos, in the midst of you know, adversity. How do you still keep going? So I don't know. I would have to say that. And I didn't know that about myself until I took a test. Has anyone ever taken the spiritual gifts test before? I took a spiritual gifts test. I think you could just Google it. As a matter of fact, I can share it as a resource. But I took it a long time ago, and that was one of my gifts. And I was like, that is me. Oh, okay, it is. And now, like a decade later, I see it. It's just I can't run away from it. Yeah, that's my answer.
That's awesome. Dr. Allen?
Yeah, I would say the parts of my identity, and I'm going to try to take an approach because I feel like, you know, Coach Franklin, Coach Ambrose, and I, and you too, Sharmika, we're all connected. So I'm just trying to offer out some other pieces of the duality in our personality and being. I would say the parts outside of what was covered today, which is family and different roles in family. I've recently discovered that probably the most peace I have in my body, in terms of my identity, are human, light, and spirit. And so I have always believed this, like, professionally, right? But now I'm living in this, and from a spiritual perspective, that you have to be willing to risk who you are for what you hope to become. You have to be willing to risk who you are for what you hope to become. Recognizing, like, whatever that was for me at 18 was something completely different by 25, completely different by 30, which is completely different for me today as I near 40. But I can say, like, there are days and experiences where when I focus on the humanity of it, like I was saying to you, like, I had to advocate for my humanity in this conversation with these two people who expected for me to be a machine. I needed to remind them that I'm a human, and I had to give myself permission. But I also understand, like, I love the part of my identity that reminds me that I'm just light. Like, I existed before today, before this time on this planet, and I'll exist beyond that. And I need to understand that because there's presence, there's gravity that comes with that in the presence, that lets me know that, like, my life isn't just about me, but it's also about those people that have made sacrifices for me. But at the same time, not for pressure, but for empowerment. And so I would say those are the pieces of my identity that I admire and appreciate the most. And they're new. Like, it's really a new space for me. I feel like I've really only been on this journey for some months.
Awesome. All right, so here goes. Anyone who is watching, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we'll address those as we're getting ready to come to a close. But I would ask if there is one last thing that you all would like to share just around this topic as we look at the reality of the space that everyone is living in right now. What would be that final word that you would want to share? And we'll start with Dr. Allen and then go to Coach Franklin, then to Coach Ambrose.
The word, are you saying I get to use one word as in vocabulary or inspiration word?
One statement.
I would say the path to empowerment starts with love and appreciation for you. And you have to hold yourself accountable for making sure that that lives in practice. So.
Coach Franklin.
I forgot you didn't already set the order. You're such an educator. You go first, you go second, you go third. I forgot. Stay true to yourself and just be the best version of yourself, period, right? Don't try to be anybody else. And if you're feeling in your body, as we spoke of earlier, that you are trying to live beyond your capacity, make some changes for yourself.
Good question. So I'll get more practical. I feel like I wasn't very practical. So I would say breathe. Literally take the time, not even time, take the repetitions, maybe 6, maybe 2, maybe 5 minutes. It doesn't take very much. Really cool hearing MA and Toya talk about the physiology and how that aligns with the mentality. If your breathing's out of order, you're probably out of order as well. So taking the time to do some breathing, whatever that looks like for you, just taking deep breaths will bring that level of awareness, in your focus, and then you can actually make some decisions after that, right? So for me, it would be literally breathing, but breathing on purpose, intentionally, as a way to manage your stress and find that work-life balance integration we spoke about earlier.
Excellent. For me, it would be remembering your why so that can really drive what you're doing each day that you wake up. Taking time to really think and pray, meditate, process through what are those key things. If I do nothing else today, what are those key things that I need to accomplish so that you can give yourself permission to let go of the excess. And then also taking time to just enjoy, relax, and take in the best pieces of life. I love nature, right? So sometimes it's standing outside and just taking a walk, going for a run. It's really cold outside up here right now. So just whatever that may be for you, just taking it in and giving yourself that permission to pause, but also to cut off work. Like, it's okay to step away. It's a Saturday. I'm not touching work today. And that's okay. And not allowing yourself to feel guilty for making that choice, because the work will get done anyway. And so in that stress reduction piece though, there's an app that I've come to find. Like, I love working out. I don't do it like I need to. Like, I really value and honor these individuals here. But there's an app that someone shared with me called 7-Minute Workout. So on my mornings when I wake up late, but I feel that excess of energy in my body, and I know I have to alleviate it somehow, I do a 7-minute workout, because 7 minutes is not going to kill my morning, right? And 9 out of 10, once I do that 7 minutes, I'm going to do more than that. But it at least gets me started, and it takes away the excuse of me not having time. Yesterday, I only had 7 minutes, right? I crushed the workout in 4. It did nothing for my calories, but it did everything for my energy, right? So just thinking about ways that we can motivate ourselves to do those things that are important for our mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional health. Because if we are empty, we have nothing left to pour out to anybody else, like, other than our steam, which will burn someone, right? So making sure that we are being our best selves at every turn. All right. So as we wrap up, my final question just to you all who are watching, but also to our panelists, is when we think about next steps for this FytAdmynLyfe group and just the goal of this work, what would you be interested in participating in the future? Would you be interested in participating in a live panel discussion, a live mindfulness activity, just something where we can truly come together and have a time where we are in person and set it aside, or even a virtual support group of some sort to continue to motivate one another. So what would you see as a next step need that you have? And that can be any of our panelists or those who are watching. And I didn't do an order this time, so however you want to go.
I'll just hop in real quick. You know, when MA reached out to me, I didn't know what it's going to turn into, but coming from a, you know, trusted friend and resource, like, oh, of course.
Mhm.
And I just think that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm doing now is reaching out to people who are, I call them A-likes, because this is an energy giver, right? So people are like, oh, you're doing another podcast? Like, yeah, and I feel refreshed from this conversation. It's been therapeutic in a sense. And I've got so many ideas I got to write down to go continue on my path. So I'm not sure who else you're gonna have next, but I would love just to be included and make sure that I can tune in and listen and learn with people who have a similar mindset, because sometimes I felt like before, it's only me. I don't want to keep burdening Principal Allen with these questions that I have about how to push into education, right? But, you know, having people like yourselves on a call like this and resources like this would be wonderful, because there are people who are looking to keep doing this work, and knowing that you have a principal leaders in schools who are looking for this information, to me, is really fascinating. So thank you again.
Thank you for joining. All right. So if there is nothing else, we're going to wrap up today, but I just want to say a special, tremendous thank you to each of our panelists for joining. Coach Ambrose, your light and your mindset that you brought was phenomenal. Dr. Allen, your transparency and your wisdom was much appreciated. And Coach Franklin, just also hearing about your transition and how you've shifted that to pour it into not just pushing excellence from others, but in books. I don't know if y'all know, this woman has written like what, how many books in the last 6 months? I think,
I'm on book 5 right now.
in how many months?
Since December. I mean, I will say the journey started last year though. It's not like I wrote my first book last May, I think. But to actually have the courage to release it, I started releasing in December of 2021. So,
Wow. Dr. Allen is going into his second book. So we have some phenomenal authors here in our midst, and just taking that time to pour out and share who you are. So thank you so much for joining. I appreciate the comments in the chat. We're going to be passing out those cards, and we're going to pass out hope like Oprah passed out those cards, so that we can keep moving. So thank you all for everything, and have a wonderful rest of your Saturday.